All right. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy blast and a half. Happy, happy, happy. Hi, Jemima. Hi, Claudia, and everyone else in the LinkedIn world. Today's guest is an extraordinary woman. Her name is Robin Merle, and Robin wrote this book, The Unsanitized Guide to Thriving After Being Fired. And how many, put it in the chat. You can just say yes or no, have experienced an involuntary exit. I'm raising my hand. I know I have. Robin is a woman who really wants to help, not just help to make you feel better, because let's face it, it sucks, but give you actionable tips and strategies to help you get through whatever that involuntary exit is. I don't care what you want to call it. We've been retrenched, or I've been eliminated, or whatever the catchphrase is. This is an opportunity to really learn how to come out of it with a lot of strength, grace, and dignity. Robin, thank you so much. We have so many people that I love and adore here for you and for this topic. Hi, Niraj. So glad to see you. He's from Ireland. So,
Well,
okay.
thank you, Lauren. I am thrilled to be here. And, in our pre-talk, we realized we have a lot in common in the way that we approach this topic and how much we want to help other people who've been through this experience.
Yes. And so, as I was making mention in your intro, right, there's lots of different ways that people are talking about the process of divorcing
Yes.
their company. And what I want to know is, first of all, why did this topic, of all the topics that you could be talking about, why did this one surface to the top for you? And what is the key, like, aha-ism that you absolutely want to share?
Okay. So, as you said in the beginning, I had my own involuntary exit, and I was a hard charging type A senior executive. I'd never been let go before. I since found out that's an anomaly. But what happened to me is, in addition to the emotional shock of this, I didn't even know how to talk about it. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how to go public. And so I started to speak with other women. And I found out, just as you said, almost every woman had been let go, downsized, reorganized, whatever you call it, or knew someone who had experienced this. But there was nothing out there. There was no manual on what you do. What do you do in the first 12 hours? How are you going to feel? How do you tell your staff? How do you go out and network after this happens to you? So I interviewed women across the country, across all industries, and I got their stories to find out. And then I gleaned tidbits of best advice from what I learned. And I have now 4 women and men, because a lot of men have read it and underlined a lot of topics in it. The manual that was never written before for this experience.
Oh
So,
man, I love that. The manual that was never written before, right?
yeah, yeah,
I don't know about you, but it felt like whiplash to me. Like
yes.
it was like a hit and run. Like, oh my God, what are you talking about? We just had a review 6 weeks ago. Everything is great and fine, and you're really embracing the culture. Blah, 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 blah. So let's talk about the rawness, right?
Yes.
The
Yeah.
wound, and what you found out about the commonality. I'm curious, do you know, like, what the percentages of people who have been in a situation of involuntary exit?
Well, like I said, just anecdotally in my sample, everybody had experienced it. Even when I went out to people in the publishing industry or people surrounded with actually getting this book out there, they said, "Oh, let me tell you what happened to me." It
Right.
was every single person. But I want to go back to that rawness that you mentioned, right? So there is a grief framework that goes along with this. And this is important because if it happens to you, you want to give yourself time to process what's going on. And I love this quote that one of the women I interviewed said. She said, they spend 2 days in orientation for you at the company. Why don't they spend 2 days on disorientation after you're exited from the company? So the first thing that in these stages that you go through, the first is shock and numbness. You're like, what just happened? And, there was a woman in my book. She said she'd been there 30 years at a publishing company. She was called in one day and they basically said, thank you for your service. Today is your last day. And she drove off, pulled onto the side and started sobbing and said, what just happened to me? It's just you really are in emotional shock. And after that, it's yearning and searching. You yearn for the way things were. You search for ways to make it not be what it is.
Wait,
and
I want to just ask you a question about the grief framework. Okay. So in the grief framework, I don't know exactly how many steps it is, but I'm going to ask a question that probably doesn't have a pat answer.
Okay.
How long does the grief last?
Oh, yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. And this same woman, because that's a question that's frequently asked, she said, it lasts as long as it takes. Now, for her, and people don't like this answer, it took her 4 years, not 4 years to find a job, but 4 years to reconcile with the baggage she was carrying.
Right.
And
well, she also had 30 years under her belt. So,
yes,
so that's longer than most people are married.
That's true. But I think that's a good point. I think it's relative to how long you were at the company. And what I say is anybody who's been there longer than 10 years, I call them loyalists. Mm-hmm. And if a loyalist has been there giving their all to a company 24/7, it inspired me to name the first section of the book The Loyalist Guide to Betrayal, because that is the feeling that people have. I was betrayed. I gave everything to this company. How could they do this? Didn't they see my value? And I know we'll get to some of this later, but the important question isn't didn't they see my value? It's you. How can you see your value? And that's really at the end of things, the work that you do to value yourself and to understand your core values so you're not always caught in this, I did something wrong, they let me go. No. There are differences between the facts of business and your feelings, and trying to separate that as part of the process of coming to terms with what's going on.
Okay, so you have the grief framework. It takes as long as it takes.
Yep.
And then, you are in kind of the next phase of this, which is the reconciliation of
right
that relationship, right?
Right. And what I talk about is is to be careful with yourself, because when you're vulnerable, you want to be very careful about how you represent yourself publicly and who you speak with. Some of us wanting news of what's going on and how can they continue without me, we might call up people, we might meet with people who are still at the job. You have to be careful. It doesn't do you any good to bash your company, right? And, what's worse, hearing that everything you built was destroyed, or hearing that somebody else is building on everything you built and taking all the credit? I mean, these things happen. It's really not a good thing to do until you have what I call you've developed immunity to emotional allergens, right? So when you go out and you'll feel yourself going, why do I feel that way? Why do I want another glass of wine? You really have to get in touch with how you're feeling and know that this is all part of the process. It's not that you're outside of the realm of what people experience and what they do. I want to go back to a first question you asked me, the ahaism of this and how it relates to what's going on in the world now. So the biggest ahaism was how closely we tie identity to our jobs.
Oh,
And and when the pandemic hit and people were laid off, they were reeling. They were like, who am I? And then they got to, we've all called it the silver lining of the pandemic. Why is my identity my job? Who
right.
do I like working this hard? What else is there about me? And I think what we've seen in the Great Resignation is more questioning like that. Now,
Oh,
I wrote my book before the pandemic. And what's now called the Great Resignation, I called it the phenomenon of being faux fired, because I heard these stories about how women would go into these situations. It would be dysfunctional. They'd go to their reviews, and one woman, it's funny in a sad way. She went to her review, and her boss said, well, yes, you've done a great job, but I'd like you to be different. And she said, different from what? And he said, different from the way you are. I was like, and so she went home saying, did he really say that? Should I document that? So she asked him again over email, what do you mean? He said, different from the way you are. Well, how do you come back from that? You don't. So she fired herself. She left. So now it's rebranded as the Great Resignation. People are leaving. And my hope, because we know there's tough times ahead, it's a very high winds labor market, is that people will be stronger from the model of others leaving and saying, look, I deserve to be valued, whether it's I want more compensation or I want, more recognition, I deserve to be valued, so that it won't be as traumatic. But I know for many it will, because it's a financial situation as well. We can't underestimate that.
So I want to take everything that you said and put the steps on pause for a minute, because there's something that's very timely that I want you to discuss, because rumor has it, word on the street, that we can expect more layoffs and a recession that is coming up towards the end of the year. Now, I am not one to get like freaked out about what people are saying and all of that, but I think it's really important to put a pin in it so that you're not an ostrich with your head in the sand, and also look for reasonable cues and other ways that you can better prepare yourself. Go.
Okay, Lauren. So I think whether there's a recession ahead or whether it's abundant times, you should always be prepared for change. Always. And I'll give you the 4 things I think are critical, but I do want to say, slip in there, that I've seen that the 5th decade is a cliff for many men and women, and it's been documented. And so prepare and so I have 2 practical pieces of advice and 2 pieces of advice for your emotional health. Number 1, build up your financial resources. It's really important. And some people say get a line of equity while you still have a job, because it's easier to apply for a line of credit. But it's important that you not put your head in the sand and build up your financial resources as much as you can. People will say always have cash. The market is so volatile, but that's really important. Look at your portfolio. 2, build up your network outside of your company and where you are. So many of us, you would use the term earlier, shelter where we are. We're so focused on our work that we forget that we don't have a network outside of the company. And this happened to a few women. They said, I don't even know people on the street. How do you do that? Join your professional associations, go to those cocktail receptions you've been avoiding where they have terrible food, join communities like Chief and like other communities. Go online. People I have found are more, especially in the entrepreneurial space, get to know some entrepreneurs. They are used to change and challenge, and they will help boost your feelings about what you can do. But have that network. Also, don't be afraid to reach out to your mentors, even if you haven't spoken to them in decades. They'll take your call. I'm a mentor. I would do that. If somebody reaches out to me, I've helped them in the beginning of the years, I'll help them now. Reach out. The two
Yes.
things.
Wait. One last thing on this point. Right?
Yes.
We've heard this cliche before, drink before you're thirsty, right? And I have seen it. You've seen it. Many people on this live right now have seen it. Most people come to me and they are like, well, I've been networking, and then I'll get a little bit more specific. Tell me what that means.
Yes.
Right? What is that? What is happening in that conversation?
Right.
And so, this is also tying back to making sure that your grief period is very much history, right? You cannot network if you are raw and resentful. Don't
right.
Don't try that at home, because it'll really shoot you in the foot, and it won't help you, but it will also just kind of like recirculate that anger and the resentment. So please be careful. It doesn't mean don't do it. It means make sure that you are in an emotional state to put yourself out there. And so, if you have any questions about networking, happy to discuss it with you. That's kind of like a thing for me. And I know Robin would be all in on that as well. So,
yes.
Okay, let's
okay.
Go back
and
to
a couple additions to that, because I do have two examples of a woman who thought she was networking when she just came up to another woman and started to complain about everything in her life. That wasn't networking. Oh, and at the end, I'm looking for a job, and somebody else who manages to do it successfully. And I do have this article in my newsletter about the criteria for successful networking. And you're absolutely right. As a good colleague of mine says, you have to be able to say the name of your company calmly if you've been let go from that company. But I think people should do this before that even happens. And be steady about the positives. Don't be a Pollyanna, but network with a deliberate aim in mind. Okay. The two other things for your sanity, your emotional health: have something outside of work that makes you love yourself and your special talents. The archaic term for this is a hobby. But I'm telling you, when we do something that really makes us feel good, whether it's cooking or gardening or remodeling a home, you're outside of that whole work environment. You're not being judged by how you do your job. You're the one doing something that makes you feel good. And physical I think is great because it gets you out of your head. Make sure you run, you bike, you swim, you get out of that, cerebralness that makes you so obsessed and has you often playing, negative self-talk loops that you really do not need.
I'm going to call out Niraj.
Okay, Niraj.
Niraj is a music freak, similar to the fact that I'm a music freak. He listens to more cutthroat, heavy metal kind of stuff, AC/DC, I don't even know, like Metallica, but that is part of his survival and his thriving strategy. Same with me. I believe that music has saved my life a couple of times. And so it doesn't have to be complicated. Literally, here it is. Jemima is singing, you learn to breathe better. Whatever it is, dance by yourself, but also what I love about finding something that you love and the mention of the physical activity, yes, of course, the endorphins, right? But
Yes.
also, I find that a lot of people will say, oh, I'm so, I've gone through this trauma and I can't even get myself up to work out or do any kind
Yeah.
of physical
Yeah.
activity. And so expending energy gives you energy.
Oh, I love that.
It's really very counterintuitive. Oh, I'm too tired to work out. Well, actually, that's really going to help you with your fuel. And I do believe after, hitting dirt a couple million times in my life, that is really where I was able to actually scrape together some dignity and some self.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So
Yeah,
even when
that's
you
important.
feel like
Hmm.
crap, oh,
Yeah.
I still worked out today. That was like sometimes like my big win. So
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. And I see Jemima there. So Jemima and I share songs almost every day. She gives me the best songs. And I think you'll like this,
oh, the
Lauren.
playlist. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. I
Oh,
have an involuntary exit playlist that
I
I
love
put together on Spotify, and it's for every phase of your journey, things you can listen to, things you can get into. And I'm working on involuntary playlists too. And I'm sure Jemima's going to give me so many ideas,
yes.
and that's going to be all about resilience. Cause I agree with you, music, moving, dancing, doing something physical, it really gets you out of your head and gives you that boost, that
Time block
you
it.
need.
Time block
Yeah.
it. Do what you
Yeah.
need to do, but don't skip that step. So lastly, I mean, we're coming up. We have like 9 minutes or so. And by the way, the playlist is here on this link. So
Yes, it
check it
is.
out. Lots of really great stuff. So send it, please. I love Anne Sweeney. Send it, please. What are the other pieces? So bring me back. So the first one was the grief. The
Yes.
second one was the say
Yearning and searching. Now, are you talking about the framework, yearning and searching?
yes.
The third is disorientation, right? And the fourth is reorientation and reorganization. And this is a grief framework that was created by Parker and Bowles, two British psychologists for
Mm.
children experiencing loss and separation and attachment. And I know we have we have the standard Kubler-Ross framework, but it seemed to me that this was much more relevant to what happens with job loss and what happens in a divorce. There
Oh,
are similarities. Anyone that's been through a divorce knows that they go through this roller coaster of grief until they get to the other side.
so let's play this out, right? So
Mm-hmm.
here we are. Okay, so like I'm okay. I'm good now, right? Like I can get past it. I'm not
Yeah.
like a scowl or eye roll on my face when I mention that comment. And I'm starting to come out of
Mm-hmm.
this shock and trauma. What do I tell my friends? What do I tell them so that it's um, honest and truthful,
Yeah.
that it isn't um, sugarcoating kind of the loss, and where is the balance between what you say so that you're upfront and going too far and kind of TMIing them and vomiting on them
Right.
your whole trauma
Right.
drama.
Right. This is really hard. The whole part of going public is difficult. And some people will just go out and do what you said, TMI and all this stuff. You have to come to terms with it yourself and how you describe it to yourself first. You have to write down basically how you're going to talk about it to different audiences and practice. When you perform something, it helps you internalize it. It has to be the truth. There are different ways to say this to a recruiter. If they say, "Oh, well, what happened?" Well,
That's
the company wanted to have a new direction, and we decided it was the best time to leave, and that was a good decision for everybody. There are ways to say it so that it takes the intensity of your anger and your pain out of it, but you have to practice that, and you have to know that when you talk about it, it's the question what happened is an emotional trigger. When you're at, let's say that you're at an event or you're with your friends or your family and they keep probing, I say, learn how to walk away. Learn it. Oh, it's so nice to see you. Learn how to walk away. You are not obligated to answer questions. You are, all you need to do is say, it's so great to see you. Yes, I'm no longer with that company. How are you? Bridge it. Use different almost media techniques to make sure that you protect yourself, right? And you're telling the truth. You don't want to give too much information. And there are the ways to learn this. I go in my book about different tools to build resilience. And these are borrowed from different women, and it's all about controlling the narrative, creating the narrative, writing your story down, write it down so that it's negative and turn it around. I was lucky to get that job becomes I did good work in that job and now it's ended and I'm going to move on and do good work elsewhere. Women created vision boards. They journaled. They created little videos, under 30-second videos, so they could remind themselves of how great they were if somebody was giving them grief, not to make a pun, and they would just put their earbuds in, look at their video, and come back and say, "Okay, I'm good." There are all different ways you do need to give time to build your resilience, and there are all different ways to do that.
That's great. One of the things that I also really liked about what I learned in your book was that we all have a tendency to immediately forget our value when this happens. It's like we have this immediate amnesia. We built this whole thing, right? We built this whole thing. Right. We built a team. We generated this revenue. We changed this workflow. All these things have happened. Bam, the axe goes down, and it's almost like, you feel like a piece of crap. And so where do you replace the amnesia with the reminders? Because I find that this is part of a very important exercise that I do with my clients too.
Yes.
That really is some of the most rewarding and stabilizing, never easy thing to really get a hold of. Help me.
Yeah. So I have two quick things. Deb Taft, the CEO of Lindauer, who I just made a presentation with about these topics, has something she calls the good list. Write down the good list of all the things that happened at your past job, no matter how it ended, so that you can remind yourself of what you did and what you achieved. And the other thing that I recommend, it sounds cheesy, do an affirmation. Write down an affirmation about yourself. Make it up. And if you feel so low you can't think of one, start with, I have a lot of experience. And as I said, and you can move it up to, I'm such a hot property that every time I walk in the room, somebody says, she's the one. Build it up. And as you and I know, there are CEOs of billion-dollar companies that still write affirmations for themselves. This isn't something affiliated with weakness. It's really something associated with strength.
And I want to also double click on the good list. Some people call it a smile file. So
I love that.
The smile file is what you're doing while you're in this organization before anything, happens. So make sure, and that would include verbatims, keep emails, like get those things while you're in that position and they're fresh and maybe they're time stamped so that you have all of the facts, because the feelings are going to come in right through the back door and grab the facts away. So don't let them rob you of these truisms. So keep that smile file going and going. I don't care where it is. I don't care what you need to do. I used to actually print them out, and then I would have a full a binder, and I would flip through them, and I would actually narrate some of them because I was so down and out that I forgot that I got that letter from that client. I forgot that the CEO of the company called me out for an innovation. I forgot all of it. And then when it came time to needing them, I was like, oh, I had nothing. So I had to learn the hard way. So, I think
that's great. And I know one woman that did that, and she put it in as a reminder on her calendar.
excellent.
Isn't that clever? Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people I know also do that at the end of their workday.
Excellent.
They just have it as part of their regular checklist. So Claudia said, add tapping to your good list. As you repeat the affirmation, you can change your brain.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
Excellent. All the things. So everyone, I'm not even like first and foremost, I'm going to follow this woman because this is somebody who is doing for us what we couldn't do for ourselves, and breaking it down and making it so actionable without kind of like the soothing, oh, it's okay, but also being empathetic to the fact that this sucks.
Yeah.
So please, follow Robin, and also go to her website. You can buy her book there, of course, on Amazon, and get the playlist. So I'm going to speak for myself. If you have any great songs, I do play a lot of music. I have a walk-up song, and I need to have that.
You have to share that. You have to share that with me.
Yes, I certainly will. Robin, thank you, LinkedIn family, for showing up. Thank you, Claudia. Mwah. And thank you, Leslie. And thank you, Barbara, and everyone. Oh, Jemima, you are our sunshine. And thank you, Raj, and everybody else, Ann Sweeney. Great to have you guys all here today. Thanks for being so participatory. And we will see you next week. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Come and hang out. Okay.